wonderful to be here. Here's my contact information. I hope you can see the screen. Yes, I can see lots of people saying hello already, but we have almost 100 people already. So if I don't answer all of your comments at the time that you write, please forgive me, okay? So let me start by saying first, thank you very much. I am very, very honored, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you, because we know that, we teachers have always been very busy, right? But with this health crisis, this world health crisis, it seems that we've managed to become even busier than we have always been, right? So it's a pleasure to have you, and an honor, because I know you're probably taking time from your busy schedules to be here attending this session with me today. Let me tell you a few things about our hour together here today. We're going to be talking about collaborative learning. If you need a certificate, you have to get in touch with Disal. At the end of the session, make sure you get in touch with Disal, and they will send you a certificate. The other thing that I want to say is that I have already mentioned, please forgive me if I don't answer your comments or your questions immediately, because we're going to have 200 people probably in this room, and it's difficult to read all these comments and talk to you at the same time. I have organized this in a way that we're going to have ample time for you to ask questions at the end. So please save your questions for the end. Unfortunately, this platform, it's magnificent, but it does not have break rooms. So we're not going to be able to do collaborative learning online per se. And when I ask you to do pair work, you're going to have to do pair work with yourself. I always say that that's guarantee of an intelligent conversation, right? When we talk to ourselves. So you may want to take notes. I don't know if you're prepared to take notes, but you may want to take notes because I may ask you one thing here or there. And what else? That's it, pretty much it. Do you have any questions so far? I hope not. No questions so far. Okay, so let's get going. So here's the abstract that we sent out describing today's session. I'm going to read it with you, okay? So collaboration is one of the key competencies that our learners must have to face our world's challenges. Collaboration has also been identified as one of the major 21st century skills that we teachers are to emphasize in class so that students are better prepared for the future. Presenter, in this case, I will comment on aspects of collaborative learning in the ELT class, how we can enhance collaboration among students, and we'll give examples using ELT textbooks, okay? It's good to know that we have people from BH, Porto Alegre, Acre, and many other places. All right, so I have highlighted the most important words in this abstract, which are key competencies, 21st century skills, students are better prepared for the future, and aspects of collaborative learning and examples. So this is what I am hoping to be able to do today with you. So this is going to be our agenda for our meeting here today. I'm going to be talking about all of these items here on the screen, and not necessarily in this order. Let me, emulate, what's the name, Yvette Sangalo, and check to see with my helpers at Disal, and I need to check to see if everything's okay, if it's working fine. Looks like it is. Okay, so then this is the agenda for today. We're going to be looking at all of these aspects that you can see on the screen. So the first thing we need to consider when we're talking about collaborative learning and 21st century skills is our 21st century students. How are our 21st century students different from the students in the 20th century? What would you say if I were asking you and you had to give me an answer or talk to a partner, ask yourself and think of one possible answer. How are they different? I'm going to show you a cartoon to illustrate. I'm sure many of you thought of this, right? How technology is different. Technology is very different nowadays. There are other differences that students nowadays are bombarded with exciting things outside the classroom. They have social media and they have YouTube, so it's very hard to excite them when they are in the classroom. They also seem to have fewer communication skills, face-to-face communication skills, because they are usually they're more used to texting and talking to colleagues using social media. What else? Sometimes they have even shorter concentration spans than they used to. There are many other differences. There are similarities as well, but we have to think of these differences when we're considering our students. The other thing that we have to consider is the world. How different is today's world? And one of the differences is the different jobs that are created every day. So can you think of jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago? One more opportunity for you to talk to yourself. Do pair work with yourself, because we're online, we don't have breakout rooms in this platform. So can you think of some jobs that, if you want to comment and leave some answers here on the chat? Can you think of jobs that are that didn't exist 10 years ago? I don't see any answers. Did anybody put in the chat any of the answers? I hope everybody can see the screen. Well, anyway, I have my own list of jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago. So all of these jobs that you see on the screen were jobs that were created in the past 10 years. I'm sure you can think of many others. I'm sure you can. Whenever I have this sort of, whenever I ask this question in face-to-face sessions, people come up with many other jobs that are not on my list. And why are we doing this? We're thinking about this because we have different 21st century students and a different world. So we're preparing students for a future, for a world that we have no idea what is going to be like. Not only because nowadays, even more so, right? Because of this world health crisis, this pandemic. So even before this happened, we did not know what the future was going to be like. And yet we have to prepare our students for this 21st century future. So it might be best to equip them with skills, with competencies that will be appropriate for anything in the 21st century. So this is what we're going to start with. We have also heard from an employer this quote that is here on the screen. We need more and better skilled graduates entering the workforce. To accommodate a fast-moving global economy and adapt to technology, we need 21st century skills, yet students are not getting them in school. So what we are listening, we're hearing all of this, and we get that this, what they're telling us is that they want better skilled, better prepared graduates. And that in our case, it's not just English that they need to know more. So this brings us to all the terminology that has been used in relation to collaboration and other life skills. It has been called the key competency of the 21st century, one of the 21st century skills. It's part of the 4 C's. It's part of the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework. Some people say it's one of the social skills or the soft skills. How does all of this work? So first of all, let's think about competencies. Competencies are not just skills. They are more complex than skills, right? And for it to be considered a competency, you need to develop in 3 areas. You need knowledge, skill, and attitudes. Knowledge is what you must know in order to be able to do something. Skill is the degree of mastery or fluency that you require to be able to show your knowledge. Skill is what you get from practice. And attitudes refers to the disposition or the mindset that you have to develop, that you have to have, or that students have to have in order to develop their knowledge. So in our case, you can think of knowledge of English, which is the information that they have in their brains. Skill is the ability to actually say and pronounce and be fluent and accurate. And attitude is the attitude that the students have towards English. Some people love English, some people dislike English, and etc. Okay, so these 3 together are competencies. And then what's with the range of life competencies? So many teachers and many educators around the world have been asking themselves, okay, so what is this about all of these life competencies that we have to teach students, that they have to learn besides English? How can we help our students, or how can we prepare our students to succeed in a fast-changing world? How can we help them be prepared to collaborate with people from around the world? How can we help them show resilience in a fast-changing world? And all of this is related to these life competencies or 21st century skills that have been talked about so often nowadays and from some time ago on. So what Cambridge decided to do was Cambridge studied and analyzed all the literature about life competencies, and we identified 42 key life competencies. We then grouped them into 6 main areas to answer the questions that the educators were asking us. How does this work in the English language programs? Okay, so we created the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework, which has 6 main areas in terms of competencies. And these, let me just check. Okay. I think everything is okay. Right, I was checking the chat. So we put the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework has 6 main areas, which are creative thinking, critical thinking, learning to learn, communication, collaboration, and social responsibilities. And 3 foundation layers that are linked to all the 6 competencies. And they are emotional development, digital literacy, and discipline knowledge. In our case, discipline knowledge is the knowledge of English. Digital literacy is knowing how to use a computer for everything, not just for Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, right? And emotional development is self-explanatory. So these are the foundation layers, and they're linked to all the 6 life competencies. So we have, Cambridge has organized the 6 life competencies into booklets, and there's also an introductory booklet, and all of this is available for free download. I'll share the site, the link with you in a moment, or at the end, I'm not sure. And so all of this has been described in these booklets. And there are also other frameworks. For example, this is an example of the P21 framework for 21st century learning. Remember I said in the beginning that there's different terminology. So some people use this P21 framework, which is also one of the frameworks that we analyzed when we were trying to put them all together. You see the yellow area in the middle? The yellow area in the middle says the 4 C's of 21st century learning. And collaboration is also in this, because the 4 C's of 21st century learning are critical thinking, creative thinking, communication, and collaboration. So because there are all of these frameworks and ideas and life competencies being talked about, Cambridge then decided to put them together in relation to English language programs. And why did we do that? Because we want to go from having bored, disengaged students to having active, interested, engaged students in our classrooms. And collaborative learning is one of the ways to do that. Where am I? Okay. I'm sure most of you must have heard about this quote from Benjamin Franklin. He said many years ago, "Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn." So here's the importance of involvement. We want students to be involved, to be engaged, to be active. It's about agency. It's about having students participate as much as they can. This is the main idea of collaborative learning, with students learning from each other, right? And there are other famous people that have talked about collaboration. Here's Helen Keller. She is a North American writer and a political activist. She was born deaf, and she's the one of the people that said, well, actually, she said, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much," right? And there are other famous people that have mentioned collaboration. Do you know who this is? Can you tell me? I don't see anything in the chat. Okay. The chat. 4 people are writing. Does anybody want to check? Sorry, to tell me in the chat? Yes, somebody has already said Steve Jobs, exactly. And I just saw a question here. What are the 4 C's? I have already explained that, right? Communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity or creative thinking. Right. So Steve Jobs said that Apple, one of the keys to Apple is that Apple is an incredibly collaborative company. How about that? Incredibly collaborative company. So you see how collaboration is crucial and important. So if we ask ourselves, so why is collaboration important now? I'm going to let you read this silently to yourselves, because okay, so you see, collaboration has become an extremely sought after skill with digital implications. Not only must people work well with others, but they also must do so in spite of physical distance and time restrictions. And nowadays, with this pandemic, what else do we have to do but work well with others in spite of physical distance and time restrictions, right? But even before this, collaboration was already considered a very important skill to have in digital age implications. So, sorry. So if we think of collaborative learning in an educational context, why is collaborative learning important in an educational context? There's an old adage that says something. Can anybody try to guess what the old adage is based on this picture? Let me see your answers in the chat. Some people are typing their answers, but I'm not sure how I can read up here. Any ideas on what this adage means? Brainstorming together, that's a possibility, but it's more like a proverb or a saying. it's two heads are better than one, or two or more heads are better than one, right? So this is old. I mean, I heard my grandmother saying that. So we've known for a long time that two heads are better than one. And in the educational context, we can also think of Vygotsky. Vygotsky is considered the father of social learning. I'm sure many of you out there know and have read about Vygotsky and have studied Vygotsky. So he's the father of social learning. And he's sort of an education rebel. And he argued that teachers should assess not just knowledge acquisition, but rather students' ability to solve problems. And pay attention to the fact that he passed away in 1934. So he was arguing this, that students should work with problem solving, problem solving, or PBL, problem-based solving, in the beginning of the 20th century. So he is the father of social learning, and we know that learning is social in nature. Of course, Vygotsky's collaborative learning has a lot to do with Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development, which is, summarizing the idea, what students can do if they are aided or guided by a peer or an adult, right? So this was sort of the beginning of collaborative learning and the social nature of learning, right? So we know that learning is social, and so this is another way of looking at collaborative learning. And so the more, the better students become in their social skills, the better equipped they will be in the future to deal with people. And this will probably help them become more successful in general, okay? We have to consider also that collaboration is a critical skill for life, but it is a learned process. It's not something that everybody is born with. Collaboration is a powerful tool that can allow educators and students to tap into new ideas and information. It allows for challenge and differentiation, enhanced confidence and self-esteem, as well as strengthening social skills. But bear in mind that one has to learn how to go through this process. Not only teachers, but students as well. For teachers, collaborative pair work and collaborative group work need crafting, thinking, planning ahead. And for students as well, they need to learn the process. So the younger they start, the better it is. And practice makes perfect. So the more we do it, the better they will be in collaborating with each other. There are other aspects of collaborative learning that we need to consider. I'm trying to keep track of this chat. It's not simple. There we go. I'm sorry, there's something just... Okay, so let's look at these issues that are on the board. Collaborative learning has many positive aspects. It helps students focus on focus. So there's a lot of mindfulness happening during collaborative learning. It also creates an opportunity for them to become aware of others. It may help us with non-judgmental interactions. Not always, not from the beginning, but this is something that needs to be worked on, and that students will learn how to interact in a non-judgmental way. There's also the acknowledgement of each person's unique contributions, right? And students also learn to recognize the need for each person to participate deeply. And all of this fosters critical thinking skills and also generates greater empathetic engagement. Have you heard some people say that empathy is the highest form of intelligence? I thought this was very interesting when I heard this, because it's so necessary, right, to have empathy, to be empathic. So all of this is our positive, our advantages of collaborative learning. So if we now think of ELT, our English language teaching and our programs, right? All of us are used to having textbooks that include pair work and group work, collaborative pair work and collaborative group work. We could even call pair work collaborative, because one of the definitions of collaborative learning is when two students learn something together, at least two. So that's what pair work involves. And there's group work. So we're all used to textbooks that have that. So we have been doing collaborative learning and teaching for some time now, even if we are not aware of the fact that we've been doing that. So in the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework, one of the things that we have is practical guidelines for teaching collaboration competencies. And we know that most of us, the English teachers around the world, we use the communicative approach. And course books generally include activities that encourage learners to work together, like pair work and group work. So we, teachers, have moved away from teacher-centered activities to student-centered learning. It has not always been totally successful for many reasons. Merely asking students to work together is not enough. In order for learners of all ages to work together effectively, teachers need to be able to be aware of how to establish collaborative practices. So we need, as I said, it's a learned process. We need to teach students how to do that. And the more they do it, they might even become capable of self-assessing in their collaborative learning tasks. So the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework provides practical guidelines for teaching collaboration competencies. I'm going to give you some examples from some of our ELT textbooks. This comes from Superminds. It's a series for students between the ages of 6 and 10. So you see that they have first exercise here, listen and circle. And then they could do the same thing in pairs, right? Saying, my favorite color is yellow, or my favorite color is red. I like airplanes, or I like cats. Exercise number 2 is also pair work, talk in class and count. It could even be groups. Here's an example from Guess What, which is for the same age group from 7 to 10. And so they're going to ask and answer with a friend and tell another friend. So we are all familiar with this kind of activity. This one is from Think. Think is for preteens and teens. And let's see here, checking the chat. Let's see here. You see here where it says train to think, creative thinking. So it says, imagine people don't have to sleep anymore. Think about the questions and answer write as many answers as you can. So we have questions here. They have to think about their own answers, but then they're going to work in a group, in a small group, to talk about the similarities and the differences that they have in their answers and in their own opinions. Another example coming from a book called Evolve for young adults and adults. Here at the bottom, you have a speaking activity where they're going to work as if they were in a cocktail format, sort of like cocktail party format, and they're going to introduce themselves to each other. This one is from Eyes Open, and here at on top of this part where it says Discovery Education, it says your turn. So it's organize a special dinner for your friends, and then you have to have at least 4 students in this case. So collaborative group work. This one is from Interchange, which is for teenagers or adults. And here on the left, you have a pair work where they ask each other questions in pairs. And on the right, you have Interchange activity number 2, and that is to plan. It's a travel destination, and they are going to work in groups. So we're all used to having this sort of activities in our textbooks, right? But as I said before, collaborative group work and collaborative pair work are learned processes. So not only the teacher, but also the students have to learn what criteria is considered when you're going to say whether the group work was successful or not. So we need to build foundations for that. We need to teach students how to deal with collaborative group work or pair work. What I usually try to do is to establish a contract with my class and ask students what they think is important when we are working in groups. And they usually come up with good listening, that we have to listen to what the other person is saying. They also mention different roles, that people in groups might have different loads, but everyone has to pull their weight, meaning there has to be equal workloads, right? Another thing that usually gets mentioned is that specific jobs, when you put students together in a group, each one has to have a specific task and to know exactly what they're supposed to do. And last but not least, they have to understand that in these cases, they're going to be learning from each other, and the teacher is going to be working mainly as a facilitator. When I was looking at these details to talk to you today, I came across something that I had never seen. I don't know if you know this. Have any of you already seen this 3 before me idea? It can be used for collaborative pair work and group work, but it could also be used in classrooms in general. Let me see if I have answers from you here. Anybody has seen this? How did I do this? But I don't see your answers here. Clique para ir para a primeira novas mensagens. I only see you guys saying Steve Jobs. You're still saying Steve Jobs. Can't be true. No idea. Somebody said no idea. For 3 before me, Gisele Pimentel said no idea. Okay, so 3 before me is a very interesting idea. 3 books, somebody said never heard. No. This is it. When they're working in groups or in pairs, we can encourage them to try three before me. First, your brain. Second, browse the room or browse your book for instructions or clues. And third, buddy. Ask your buddy for help. So it's 3 before me. And I then saw this. So it's brain, book, buddy, boss. And I'm going like, boss? The teacher is the boss? I'm not sure I want to convey that message. So I would probably change it to brain, book, partner, teacher, or brain, browse, buddy, teacher. But I thought it was very interesting to have this poster or this idea in the classroom to encourage them to look for other resources before they come ask the teacher for help. Right? Okay. There are other things to consider as well when we're thinking of collaborative learning. And they are, instructions have to be very clear. Now, I ask you, would you give all the instructions for the group at the beginning, or do you give the instructions after each step is concluded? I tend to favor give instructions after each step is concluded, because if we give all the instructions at the same time, they tend to forget. We also have to have clear goals, clear objectives. Students need to understand what it is that is expected from them. The other issue to consider is diversity of groups. We need divergent thinking. We need a pool of talents, students with different talents in the group. So this brings us to the third item on this list. Should the groups form organically or should they be assigned by the teachers? What do you think? Should we let them decide who's going to be in their groups, or should we assign the groups? It depends, somebody has already said. Let them decide. Then we can ask ICQs, yes. Organic, let them decide. Always let them decide, or, well, we have organic, let them decide, and depends. I agree with depends, right? Because sometimes we want to let them decide, so then they form organically, and sometimes we want to put certain students together to ensure divergent thinking, to ensure different talents, to ensure different forms of different perspectives. So it might be that at times we want to organize the groups, we want to assign them to different groups. Another issue that is usually taken into consideration is that some people believe that we should have equal girl-boy ratio. And this is what the literature said. I'm thinking it depends, right? I think perhaps it might be a good idea, but we also have to consider which of the students are more dominant, which of the students tend to monopolize, which are more outspoken. And then when we are assigning the groups, then try to mix these people in with other kinds of behavior. The other thing that needs to be considered is group size. Most of the literature agrees that four is the ideal number for a group size. If you have fewer than 4 members, you might not have enough divergent thinking, enough different perspectives, enough different talents. And if you have 6 or 7, it might be a bit too much. So between 4 and 5 is, but 4 being the ideal number, if possible. And the other issue here on this list, when we're talking about collaborative learning, is the use of different strategies. The use of different strategies. Of course, the textbooks already suggest different strategies, but there are other things that we can consider. So here are some strategies for collaborative learning. First one is think, pair, share. Are you familiar with that? I always do a lot of think, pair, share. So if you've been in a face-to-face session with me, you've probably had a think, pair, share activity. So what does this mean? First, you give students time to think about whichever task it is that they have to do. So thinking is individual work. Then they get together with a partner, probably just turning around and talking to the person who's next to them. And after, they share either with a different partner or with you put two pairs together. So this is very good for collaborative learning because they have to listen, they have to pay attention, they have to respect other people's opinions, they get different perspectives, and it starts with individual work, moves on to pair work, and then on to either groups of 4 or different. Okay, somebody's talking, but to somebody else. The other strategy for collaborative learning is problem-based learning, right? Where students have a problem that they're going to work on, and they have to first understand the problem, then come to a solution. And a third strategy for collaborative learning is using jigsaw collaborative learning that can be used, for example, for reading a text in English, where each student or each group gets a part of the text, and then they have to get together and teach each other or tell each other the parts that they read. PBL, problem-based learning, or problem-based learning in between quotes, could even be used in the English language programs for students to figure out the grammatical rules for certain things. I mentioned that I really like Think, Pair, Share, and I found this excellent site that has 10 fun alternatives to Think, Pair, Share. So I thought I would share it with you. It's here if you want to take a picture of the screen, but it's also going to be at the end in the reference slides. Oops, okay? Very interesting, fun alternatives. So, having said all this about cooperative learning, I know you may be thinking, right, but does this work with all age groups? How would young learners react? Can I start this when, at what age? And how about time constraints? I don't have time to do all of this group work in class. And here's a question to you. Have you ever skipped group work, like the group work that is suggested in the textbook because you think you're not going to have time? I have, I confess. But that was before I understood how rich and important collaboration and collaborative learning was, and that the fact that it's a key competency for the 21st century. Also, some of you may be thinking, oh, but I really like doing competitive games. And you didn't say anything about competition. Isn't competition more exciting and more dynamic? Here's my answer. Well, actually, I'm going to give you answers. I hope to answer several of these questions that I have asked. And as I said, we're probably going to have time for questions at the end. So in terms of competitive versus collaborative learning, here's a quote for you. So when we have collaborative learning, we tend to create a positive, dynamic environment, in contrast to competitive classrooms, where we may have divisions, isolation, and a sense of failure. So consider that. And also the point here today is collaborative learning. So here's the booklets in our Cambridge Life Competencies Framework again, just to show you that we have, if you ask yourself, well, can we do this with students that are 3-year-olds, for example? We have divided the learning journey into different stages, and the competencies vary depending on the stage of the learning journey. So we go from pre-primary to primary, secondary, higher education, and network. Oops. And in the brochure for collaboration, you're going to be able to read in more detail what the definition of collaboration is. And we have identified 4 core areas, right? Here are the 4 core areas of collaboration. And what I really want to show you now are the can-do statements. The can-do statements they describe what students can do at each stage of the learning journey in relation to collaboration as a competency. So if you look here, you will see that we're talking about collaboration. What are the can-do statements of the pre-primary? If you consider the core area of taking personal responsibility for own contribution to a group task, they are going to be very different from the can-do statements for the secondary, for teenagers, using the same core area of the collaboration competency, okay? So these are observable behaviors. So it's very interesting to read this after the session, if you have time, because you will then find behaviors that you will be able to observe in your learners when they're working in collaborative pair work or group work. Here's, in terms of a practical example, we're coming to an end, the last 15 minutes of our talk. Our Cambridge Life Competencies Framework also has practical guidelines for teaching collaboration competencies. Well, actually all the other competencies as well. And so we give you a list of general suggestions like you see here. And we also have practical examples for each stage of the learning journey. So practical examples in this case for young learners, what you could do with them that will be considered collaborative learning or that will be collaborative tasks, okay, in order to build their collaboration skills. So we have this for all the different stages of the learning journey. Here's the link to the site where you can find the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework and all the booklets that are free to download. Moving on, let's go to a practical example from a book, from one of the textbooks. And before we start, I like to think of myself as an iceberg teacher. Whenever I'm teaching or planning, I always think of the iceberg. And if I were to ask you to think of the iceberg as a metaphor for teaching and learning, what would you say? What is the connection between an iceberg and the process of learning and teaching. Any thoughts? No, Rob, not that. You only see some Julian. Most part is hidden. Classroom is just the top. Yes. So this is my idea, at least. I usually ask this in class when we are face to face, and teachers have the most incredible different perspectives. So this is, yes, what we there are a lot of invisible skills, right? And when you're doing collaborative pair work or group work, what's visible is the task. And there are a lot of other skills that seem to be invisible, but are not really. The students need to learn, good listening skills. They need to respect partners and group members. They need to manage emotions, and etc. So I'm going to propose an activity as if you were a student, okay? Imagine you are at space camp. Choose 3 activities that you're going to do. First, you're going to choose these 3 activities from this space camp. So imagine you formed a group of 4, right? If we had breakout rooms, we could do this even if you're teaching online, like I am now. But in this case, we don't have breakout rooms. So we have formed the groups of 4. I'll let you decide organically. And before you decide what you're going to do at Space Camp, we're going to decide the roles in your group. So one person is going to be the time manager. Is going to control the time. Another person in the group is going to be the task manager. The other person is going to be the participation manager to ensure that everyone is participating. And the 4th person is going to be the English manager to make sure that everybody's speaking English. Okay, so decide within your group who's the time manager, the task manager, the participation manager, and the English manager. Let's imagine you have decided. There are other roles that you can use in the future, such as coordinator, note taker, summarizer, planner of next steps. There are other possible roles, but today we're going to go with these. So imagine you have decided what your role is. Everybody in your group of 4 has a role, and now you need to choose 3 activities you want to do at Space Camp. Here's the information again. You may want to explore a real spacecraft, build a model spacecraft. Look at the list and choose 3, please. Okay, let's imagine you have finished, you have already chosen. So this is the think part, the individual part. So now in your group, you're going to share your activities, and you're also going to remember to be the task manager or the time manager, or etc. And then agree on 4 activities for the group to present to the class. Okay? Imagine you have done that. I'm going to have to compress and move us forward because you don't actually have a group, so you can't actually do this. So now the 5th step for this collaborative group work is prepare your presentation about the activities, decide what you will say, decide who will say what, and each group member must say something. Okay? And lastly, you present your ideas to the class. All right? So how would this project work have been different if I had just said, do the task on your own and then present your information to the class? There would have been no learning from each other, right? What if I had just said, you work as a group, but I didn't give you roles or anything? Would it have made a difference? Yes, some people are saying that it would have been tedious, they would have been lost, and etc. Exactly. So remember I said that this is a process that needs to be learned both by learners and teachers. But it's worth investing time into this, because when you have collaborative group work, what is visible is the final presentation. But there are many other aspects that were taken, that were learned and practiced. Listening, respecting group members, putting egos aside, being honest but tactful, managing emotions, being comfortable with chaos. There's usually some chaos at the beginning of the group work. Strategizing on a plan on how to decide which of the 4 ideas to use, and etc. Yes, clear instructions are important. We talked about that before, right? And that's why I said I would divide the instructions up according to each step of the task. So this is one of the meanings for the metaphor of the iceberg, right? The visible task at the top, but the invisible social skills at the bottom are much bigger. To face a family problem. Okay. So before I take some of your questions, I hope yes, looks like we're going to have time. Let me just show you the final slides. Here's just a slide for you to know that we have a blog for teachers. It's called World of Better Learning blog. It's free for teachers, lots of information, lots of help, lots of support during these difficult times. You can find the Cambridge Framework for Life Competencies for free download here in the blog, or you can ask Dr. Google. So here's the page that has the link to the free download. I also would like to mention that the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework relates to the BNCC, and we have created a document mapping out the competencies in the BNCC and in the Cambridge Life Competencies Framework. So it looks like this. And so we have the BNCC in Portuguese and in English, then the competency and the area and the observable behaviors and everything. So in case you're interested, this is also available. So we have descriptions of can-do statements for every stage of the learning. This is the link to the site where you can find the BNCC document mapped to the competencies. Here are the references that I used for today's session. This, and this. Okay, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Any questions? No link ideas? Yes, here are the links. All of these are links, Gisele. Oops. Anybody else? Any other question? Yes, somebody has mentioned that Zoom has breakout rooms and they can work together. Let me see. Here's a question. Why doesn't it show up here? Sorry, not this. I'm sorry. How can we do this kind of work now, children at home? It depends on how old they are. Parents trying just to do the activities. How do we ask children and parents to work together, each one at home? Well, there are some platforms, Renata, that have breakout rooms. And these breakout rooms are where students go to form the groups or the pair works. Okay? So in this case, it's possible, even if you are teaching online. But it will depend on the age of the kids, right? If they are very young, like pre-primary, I don't think it would work unless a mother or a grandmother or a father is willing to help. Anybody else? Any other question? Where can we read it from? Most part is hidden. Renata, did you say I'm sorry, I think Renata is saying that will the slides be available? Yes, this is going to be the slides and the links. The links are available because this is being recorded and it's going to be available through Disal. It's available. It's going to be available on Disal's YouTube channel. So here are the links to the reference links again. Okay. The slides, the links, yes, they are available. Anybody, what is this? Let me see if I can read this. Somebody asked. Which platforms offer breakout rooms? Zoom, Google Meet, Easy Talks. This one that Disal uses that I don't know, it's not, I think it's called Click Meeting. No, this one doesn't. I'm sorry, my mistake. This one doesn't. But Zoom does, Google Meets does, Microsoft Teams does. There are many that do, okay? What else? Any other questions? Is it okay for online pair? Yes, you could do online pairs. You could do breakout rooms for pair work. You could do breakout rooms. Yes, the slides are going to be available in the recording of the session on YouTube. Is it okay for online pairs? Let me see what else. This is an interesting question. All questions are interesting. As I said, forgive me for not being able to answer all the questions. Make sure you write to me, send me an email, or find me on Facebook or Instagram. And I will be very happy to continue the conversation or to answer questions, the ones I didn't answer here. I don't know why this is not showing. This is a question that didn't come with a question mark, so it was more difficult to find. How can we make all students benefit from it and not only the proactive students? By assigning groups, you can decide who's going to be where. Maybe you put all the proactive students in the same group and all the non-proactive students in another group, and then they are all going to benefit from collaborative group work or pair work, right? Or also working on the contract, working on the fact that they understand that everybody needs to participate, that everybody needs to have a role, everybody needs to pull their weight, all of this. Okay, time is almost up. I want to say, once again, thank you very, very much for your participation, for your patience, for being here, for all the wonderful work that I'm sure all of you are doing, for being interested in your personal, professional development. It was a pleasure to be here with you. Feel free to send me an email, or as I said, to find me on Facebook or on Instagram. And I will be glad to continue this conversation and to hear more from you. Forgive me once again if I didn't answer your question, but we had almost 200 people in the classroom today, okay? And also remember, stay home, but if you must go out, wear a mask, okay? Be safe, everyone. Thank you very much. And how does one do this? Bye-bye.